Hello, and welcome to The Source, your guide to keeping pace with the growing challenges of compliant communications. Communications channels are evolving in near real time, and compliance teams are faced with the challenges of keeping up. Firms are under increasing pressure to make sure they're capturing all their communications channel data to remain compliant. I'm joined today by Pankaj Anand, Head of Governance Technology Solutions at StoneX. Pankaj, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So as the title of the episode might suggest, we're taking a look at communications channels today and why you need to capture them all. So I'll start with our first question. Part of the challenge of capturing communications consistently is that channel providers often move the goalposts by introducing new features and capabilities. These improvements are aimed at making for better user experiences, but they can come at the cost of keeping compliance on the back foot. How do you think compliance teams can address this challenge?
Well, I would say, I think first and foremost is collaboration. In my role, just a little bit about what I do. It was created specifically because we have compliance, legal departments, and compliance departments are obviously different parts of the world, different businesses, different jurisdictions, different regulators. So very different compliance teams. And then you have like a global core IT team that sort of look after all of our tech. And we were seeing lots of things sort of lost in translation between compliance, their requirements, their needs, their focus areas, and what technology we're able to provide. So my department was created probably about 12 to getting on for 18 months ago to provide sort of that dedicated focus for compliance and a few other functions, including legal. And so really what we've been trying to do is really focus on the collaboration. So if tech are keen to roll out new functionality, if there's a new update, Microsoft Teams, for example, that provides new cool functionality, then it has to go through compliance for a review and the context, because compliance will often just say no because it's easier to say no than it is to actually explore the solution. So really part of my role is just making sure that dialogue is happening, making sure that we're having sort of a balanced decision making, so that when IT are coming with the features that are available, that we're actually having those reviews and looking at it from both angles. The technology will allow us to accelerate in this way, but we need to always make sure that we're compliant and we're capturing, and we're not going to make ourselves vulnerable for our capture and surveillance processes.
No, absolutely. I think in an industry where technology kind of dictates the pace of growth, taking a kind of softly or more considered approach to making sure that technology is compliance first is obviously vital. So our 2023 Compliant Communications Survey found that 59% of respondents said their organisations had banned channels like WhatsApp or WeChat completely. Do you believe that channel bans are an effective means of working around regulatory expectation?
I think the obvious has to be no. Control is so important, but I think looking at that sort of bad actors are bad actors. It doesn't matter what restrictions you put in place. If somebody wants to behave inappropriately, various comments will always happen. So I think really for us, it's culture. Making sure that tone from the top is right, and there's been a lot of focus there. And then trying to be reasonable with the amount of comms channels that we're offering. One that I dealt with or I'm dealing with currently actually is Line in Japan. People don't use WhatsApp. Our clients don't use WhatsApp. So whilst we've got WhatsApp that's used throughout the region, it's not used in Japan. So it's very difficult to say, can you tell your client or ask your client to start using this app? They're like, well, they don't use it culturally, so no. So there are cases like Line where you just have to make an exception, and if the tech can support it, in terms of when I talk about tech, I'm talking about sort of that comms capture piece for our archiving, then we will endeavour to allow and support. But for us, it's the governance around it that's really key.
For sure, I think you summarised it well. Firms will always towards using the channels that their clients are using because they want to keep those business relationships running as smoothly as possible. And people will also tend to want to use the channels that they're most familiar with. And
Yeah.
obviously, a lot of us are familiar with WhatsApp from our personal lives. So its use in business and its growth as a business tool makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, unless you're in the US, in which case they don't really use WhatsApp much as well. I mean, certainly that's what we keep hearing, which is frustrating for us because that is our global solution, which I'm sure we'll dive into in some detail later.
Yeah, I guess they maybe they stick to SMS a little more than we do here, which is interesting culturally. So our survey also found that 61.5% of respondents found they struggled to get employees to comply with rules around electronic communications capture. How do you think firms need to approach getting buy-in from staff when it comes to compliant comms strategy?
I think making the making sounds really simplistic, but making the policies really easy and clear to understand is really what I think is the big differentiator. Because I think a lot of the time we sort of write policy thinking that this will keep the firm safe because it will, we're sort of ticking the box that we can say to regulators, etc., that we've done what we need to do. Whereas I think that whilst that's really important, it's all about making sure that people understand your policy. So yes, you may have the best policy in the world, but if people don't know where it is and they're just sort of, presented to it, once a year and they attest to it, that's different from just, people wanting to check a policy and actually see what they can and can't do. Because, policies are not things that you can just read once a year and say, right, I've memorized that policy and I've attested to it, so therefore I'm good. You need to keep going back, reminding yourself, and the policies obviously will change. And so, that's the big sort of challenge I think that the industry faces, is making policy digestible and making it simple to read, understand, and therefore simpler to follow.
Yeah, I think that repetition around policy and the reminders and keeping people in the loop of any changes is really important. People will only become familiar with those policies the more they engage with them and the more they're talked about. And I think also I recently read that last year the government introduced, or the UK government introduced, a new policy around the use of WhatsApp by senior figures within the government. Their previous policy that replaced was 10 years old, and obviously in the tech space that's a lifetime. So keeping them up to date and keeping across that is obviously very important. So we're at the start of 2024 currently. We're looking ahead to the challenges that the year might present to us. What do you see as the emerging communications capture challenge or challenges over the next 12 months?
I think the challenge for me in my role is the volume of requests I get for we route them all through IT, but ultimately, and this is a really positive thing, that our IT departments now, as much as they've got good guidance, they're always erring on the side of caution. That, gone are the days where they were like, yeah, this so and so is requesting access to this conference app. We've installed it on their corporate device, and they're good to go. Now it's like, well, what does that conference app allow you to do? It's like, oh, just to get an agenda, for a conference. Oh, and communicate with anyone who's attending. So, that's just an example, but that's something that it seems very sort of an innocent request, but with the lens on compliant communications being where it is right now, we're taking no chances to make sure that we look at this really, really carefully. So we've put processes in place to make sure that IT have sort of channels to say, this is what this app will allow us to do. We look at it, we examine it in a forum, and then we'll make a decision. So we've put that sort of decision making in place. I think we're trying to come up with some standard things. So the conference example is a good one, because we were inundated. We were getting so many that we were like, we can't keep doing this on a request by request basis. So we've now put a sort of a guidance note in place that we'll be appending to our global policies, which is you are allowed to use conference apps, and we'll instruct our IT departments, for example, to allow these as permissible on your corporate device in our corporate app store. But I'll meet you at meeting point X. It's, if it's purely logistical, but there can be no other comms on there. So I think that sort of guidance is things that we're learning, we're reacting to, and I think just trying to deal with the volume of these new requests, and also the 100 requests for Telegram that I seem to get every week.
I think the question seems to be what's after WhatsApp. Telegram seems to be a strong contender.
It does seem to be. It does seem to be going that way. I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm joking about the 100, but there are so many requests that we receive for it. So I think that is the next big thing on the horizon. But we haven't really solved for WhatsApp properly yet. I mean, what the thing that we've done, I think, which is, years ago, a previous employer, there was a big move from corporate devices to bring your own devices, and obviously that's cost driven and also technology driven. And now it's interesting to see that trend, certainly in our organization, which is obviously smaller than some of the other organizations I've worked in, going the other way. So we if you are, a regulated employee, if you're an associated person, regulated in any way, and your comms need to be monitored, you need to be communicating with a corporate mobile device. We've put that policy in place, and that's actually really, really helpful. But it's still, there's still so many challenges even with corporate devices, because corporate devices means different things to different people. It's like, well, I was given, the company pay my bill, therefore it's a corporate device. Like, that's not a corporate device necessarily. So we've really had to go through. We've done a big sort of taken our full inventory of our mobile devices, and we've just gone through it root and branch, and to say, right, these are compliant, these need to be reissued. These are using the wrong type of devices. These need completely new devices, etc. These can be upgraded, and just taking that approach. So yeah, so it's that is a challenge, but a challenge that we're working through at the moment.
I think that the kind of debate between bring your own devices and corporate owned, personally enabled devices, cope. It's definitely it's one of the kind of seemingly binary choices where you can see the benefits of both sides. As you said, bring your own device is more of a cost sort of balancing exercise. But yeah, from a compliance point of view, obviously having a handset that all of the communication methods and channels that are on there and how they're filtered and stored makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that the example you used of the kind of one-shot app for an event, a lot of the compliance news focuses on large platforms. It focuses on Teams, WhatsApp, and maybe those smaller risks get overlooked because you feel they're fairly benign because it's been created for this single event. That's as far as it goes. But no, it's deeper than that, and it's about how people can and will use it. And I think it's really important to be aware of that. So I'm going off piste a little bit here. And last time we spoke, you talked about Skype in Brazil and the US. So that's I recall you saying that's their kind of main channel of communications in that part of the business, and it as kind of not necessarily a replacement for Teams, but sort of managing both of the.
No, the other way around. So that the business that we have in Brazil have used before, the StoneX franchise. That business obviously existed. We acquired by our firm, and culturally in Brazil, they group electronic conversations are very popular. So you have a broker or a number of brokers on our side, a number of clients on the client side that will collaborate electronically via a group. Skype was the solution of choice there because it was very easy for them to initiate these group chats that are securely archived, and the surveillance on these chats. But Skype is now obviously a legacy provider, a legacy service. So we're having to move away from it. So the challenge we've had or the challenge we have today in Brazil is they're very, very happy to move to WhatsApp. Culturally, socially in Brazil, WhatsApp is very, very popular. They don't foresee any problems there, so they want to move to WhatsApp. So far, so good. Problem we've got is that WhatsApp for Business doesn't allow the group chat functionality at this moment in time, and that is, so we're restricted to bilateral, and that won't really serve our business for the nature of those conversations. So we're going ahead with the POC for WhatsApp for Business in Brazil for a number of reasons. But there is that big limitation at the moment on the group chats, and we are, fingers crossed, hoping that the Meta do address this. We know it's on their radar. We know that they're looking at this, but they're not very good at giving timelines, unfortunately.
And interesting. inverse of what we spoke about at the start there, about maybe a needed, necessary, requested quality of life improvement for a service being asked for, rather than it being not necessarily foisted on the users, but certainly being driven by the developers.
I think the important thing for us is that communications, the capture of communications, it's really complex, and so we've got an absolute whiz in our IT function who is fantastic with sort of drawing out those visualizations of all of our tech systems, specifically the comms stack. And when she revised it last year, late last year, we all saw it and we were like, "Wow, is that really what our communications platform architecture looks like?" And the thing with StoneX is if you were a new company, or we are a new company, but if we were a brand new company, not a company that's grown through lots of acquisition, there is no way you would describe it, you would design a comms platform the way it is today for us. But obviously we haven't had that luxury, like many firms, don't we? We've grown and we've acquired, and we go with what we have. But when she drew out the architecture of all our comms platforms and the sheer number of them, it was quite mind blowing to think that we have this many. So it is really, really complex. I think my job is to make sure that that complexity is sort of translated to my internal customers, our compliance departments, legal departments, to make sure that they understand, that this is why it's so complex. We can't just change it overnight either. There are different, rundown periods on various contracts and engagements. And then, as I highlighted earlier, we've got strategic platforms like WhatsApp for Business that's going to be our strategic, mechanism going forward of capture, but they don't do a lot of the things we need them to do today. So you've got to factor all of that in. So it leads to a very sort of confusing landscape, but one that I think with the right level of focus and collaboration, I think as long as everyone's aware of it and where we're trying to get to, I think that puts us in as good a place as we can be.
I think it's such a common issue for businesses as they digitize. You end up with a legacy architecture, a legacy tech stack where you've bolted things on, adopted things as and when they've been needed to, kept things moving and running just about, and then you take a step back and look at it and realize that you've got an incredibly complex, interconnected web of services, and people just want to add more on top. So yeah, streamlining and simplifying, understanding where you need to maybe simplify is definitely really important, and I think it helps to have the right tech solutions for that.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you for your insight, Pankaj. It's been fantastic speaking to you today. I'm sure our listeners will glean lots of useful tips and they can have some thoughts about their own strategy. But as ever, wonderful to speak to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Jay, and thanks for hosting us today.
Thank you again to our subject matter expert for joining us. And of course, thank you for listening. Whatever your comms compliance challenge or data dilemmas, make sure you tune in next time and get your solutions and insight straight from the source.